happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And I'm wearing a purple tie. I don't care who knows I'm gay, because we are celebrating Christopher Street Liberation Day this weekend.
I think we're both in colors of the rainbow flag, and I hope you're having a happy Pride wherever you are, but we are really happy this particular day when we're taping because we just got two huge decisions from federal courts on marriage. In the first appellate breakthrough since the Windsor decision at the Supreme Court a year ago, the 10th Circuit has upheld the lower court ruling that overturned Utah's ban on same-sex marriage.
And Indiana's ban on same-sex marriage was struck down by a federal judge, and people started marrying immediately.
And the National March for Traditional Marriage was a big flop in Washington, D.C.
There were a flurry of pro-LGBT announcements from the Obama administration that we will scrutinize.
You know how they're always exempting religious denominations from having to perform marriages, as well they should. Well, the religious are coming along anyway. Presbyterians are opening marriage to same-sex couples.
And the Methodist Church reinstated a pastor who was defrocked for presiding over the same-sex marriage of one of his gay children. He has 3 gay children.
We continue to follow the story of the small town in South Carolina, which this week voted to restrict the powers of the mayor who fired the lesbian police chief. But he is trying to end-run the city council's desire to see her reinstated.
The transgender woman, Yazmin Shancez, was found murdered in Fort Myers, Florida, as trans activist Zoraida Reyes was laid to rest in Santa Ana, California.
Bad news, as usual, from the New York State Senate, which let a couple of key LGBT proposed laws die.
LGBT pride marches have come to Kearney, Nebraska, and Beaumont, Texas, for the first time.
We'll show you. Yeah. And June 27th was National HIV Testing Day, but it's never a bad day to get tested.
Right.
And it's never a bad day for good news from the court system of the United States of America.
Well, the biggest news, I guess, is, pardon my friends in Indiana, but it's the appellate decision in the Utah case. This is the first appellate decision since the Windsor decision, which gave federal rights to same-sex couples. This is the 10th Circuit. Upholding the great lower court decision that we got there in Utah.
We, as you know, because I know you follow these things in detail, we have been winning all these cases at the level of original jurisdiction in the federal courts, the district courts.
And state courts.
And state courts, too. So then these cases have to work their way up from each state to the district itself to be decided at the appeals court level.
Unless there is no appeal.
Yeah, but I don't think we have a single district without some kind of appeal.
Right.
Anyway, I know we have, well, I could list them, but the 10th Circuit is the first to have an actual decision from the appeals court. This is a 3-judge panel of the appeals court. The decision was specifically in the Utah case, but this covers the states of Utah, Colorado, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Kansas, and New Mexico, where same-sex marriage is already legal. But what it does, except that a stay was entered immediately, so it doesn't legalize these marriages immediately, but all these states technically now have legal same-sex marriage on the basis of this ruling.
Right, and the word strict scrutiny came up, which is the highest level of scrutiny, but it turns out they're applying it not to us as gay people, but to the institution of marriage. That if you're going to discriminate in marriage, then you really better have a good reason, because after all, we do allow people who are incarcerated in this country to get married, etc. So
we allow
why not gay people?
We allow Britney Spears to get married.
That's right.
Exactly. So this is really fantastic news from the 10th Circuit. I wonder if Olson and Boyce are a little upset. They're working on the different circuit in Virginia, the 4th Circuit, I think, and the 10th is now the first to decide. So the Utah Attorney General has said already that he's going to appeal this. Now he has a choice. He can ask for a hearing by the full 10th Circuit. There are many, many judges in each of these circuits, and then they assign a 3-judge panel to hear these appeals. But if you lose at the 3-judge level, you can apply for an en banc rehearing, which means the entire bench, which may be 20, 25 judges. They don't all sit at once. They just all read the case and come out with an opinion. Or if that is rejected, or even if they don't want to go to them, they can go directly to the Supreme Court. And
do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
We're quite happy to have it go to the Supreme Court any minute because we believe we will win.
Right.
But fantastic news. It was a local lawyer, Peggy Tomsick, in Salt Lake, who argued this case and did, by all accounts, a brilliant job. And with the help of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which jumped into this case too, so they are the big winners in this 10th Circuit.
And
along with the couples.
In Indiana, we got summary judgment from Judge Richard Young, a federal judge, and no stay. He says that banning same-sex marriage violates equal protection, and guys began immediately marrying in Indianapolis, and I imagine some female couples as well. The Attorney General says that they'll appeal that case as well.
I'm sure they'll ask for a stay, too, and they'll go to a higher court to ask for a stay. But as of this moment, as we report this, couples are marrying in Indiana. One of the cases involved here was a lesbian couple one of whose members was dying and eventually did die, and the court had ordered the state to recognize their marriage and while they were deciding all these other cases and deciding the case for sure. And this has now all resolved itself in this ruling.
And then I guess we should talk about the Ninth Circuit ruling. This is a case that has given us heightened scrutiny. It had to do with a pharmaceutical company thing and whether a gay person could be put on a jury or objected to on a jury. But they did do that. They did resolve that en banc.
Well, they refused a full en banc rehearing. One of the judges had asked for that, and it was refused by the entire court. So the lower, smaller group of Ninth Circuit judges ruling stands, which says that to kick a gay person off a jury just because you're doing a case about HIV and AIDS requires heightened scrutiny of that decision.
But that means we, not marriage, but we do get heightened scrutiny throughout the Ninth Circuit now.
Exactly, which is all the West Coast states.
That is a big breakthrough.
Yes.
And it is grounded in Windsor.
Yes. A couple of notes. The U.S. Conference of Mayors passed a resolution reaffirming their support for same-sex marriage and asking the courts to act.
Yeah, they want the Supreme Court to get it over with.
As you know, there are about 9 million cases filed in the state of Florida, and the Orlando City Council and mayor and the city of Miami Beach have filed amicus briefs on our side in one of those cases.
But also in Florida, the anti-gay Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is trying to intervene in the marriage case because the clerk of the courts withdrew opposition to a summary judgment motion there.
The Presbyterian Church USA General Assembly, which is an annual meeting, voted quite strongly to allow Presbyterian ministers to conduct same-sex marriages in states where same-sex marriage is legal.
They changed everything to two people. Yeah,
marriage is the union of two people rather than a man and a woman. Now, this has to be ratified by the majority of the 173 presbyteries around the country. But people are optimistic about that.
And among the Methodists, we told you that they had defrocked Reverend Frank Schaefer after he officiated at the marriage of his gay son. He has 3 gay kids, as I said. he says, so they've now reinstated him, and they said, well, 30 days off or something like that, that's enough, and they reinstated him. He's going to resume pastoral work in Santa Barbara, ministering to college students. The conservatives are unhappy. This church, Methodist, still teaches that homosexuality is incompatible with church teaching, and they won't ordain avowed practicing homosexuals.
And yet they have not excommunicated Hillary Clinton.
And they still forbid same-sex marriage. But it may lead to a split in the church.
Yes, it may, and it may lead to a split in the Presbyterian Church, too.
Well, they've lost about 350 congregations out of 10,000 already because they already allowed ordaining of gay clergy.
Right. Frank Schaeffer will get some back pay. He won his case because what the Methodist Appeals Court decided was that he'd been defrocked on the grounds that they were afraid he was going to do it again. And his lawyer said, well, you can't say that. Who knows what he's going to do in the future?
He's got 3 gay kids.
You can only punish him for what he's actually done. So that's the loophole he walked through to get his standing back. We heard a terrible story about a decision by a surrogate judge in Manhattan who had
Nora Anderson, her name.
Well, the case is about 2 gay men who'd been together for 30-some years. One of them died, had left a will leaving his part of his estate to his mother and part of his estate to his surviving partner. So then the surviving partner is the executor. He's supposed to be the co-executor with the mother. She declines. He takes care of everything, divides it all up. And then he dies, and the kids, the mom dies too. The kids, the brother and sister, come in and say, oh, his estate can't have this stuff. He never should have had anything. We should get it all. And the surrogate judge says, yes, you're right. The partner had no right to anything, even though the will said, here's how it's
outrageous.
divided.
And this is right here in Manhattan.
Yeah, so don't think this is over yet. And in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh, because same-sex marriage is now legal in Pennsylvania, the county has decided that city employee spousal benefits will only go to those who are actually married. They used to give them to same-sex partners who weren't able to be married as partners, but they've wiped out that system, and you have to actually be married.
You can still be domestic partners in New York City. They didn't get rid of that after we got marriage.
The national organization held its March for Marriage last week in D.C.
They got under 2,000 people. Many were bussed in from the Bronx, speaking of New York, by Reverend Ruben Diaz Sr., who was a state senator.
Told they were being brought to Washington free to see the monuments.
A Democratic fundamentalist poverty pimp.
Only one elected official showed up, Representative Tim Huelskamp, a Republican from Kansas, who was vicious in his hate.
But the National Organization for Marriage got a ruling for the IRS where they were paid $50,000 in court costs over the leak of their donor list.
Yes, but the leak was ruled accidental, and no one was punished for that other than, getting that reimbursement of their court costs.
And in this context, discredited lobbyist Ralph Reed, you may remember him as the head of the so-called Christian Coalition, compared court decisions for same-sex marriage to, wait for it, the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which held that African Americans, slave or free, had no right to sue in federal court. Among other things.
Well, he just held his Freedom Coalition conference at the same time as this NOM March for Marriage. The marchers all went over to the conference after their pathetic little march. And the conference, Ralph Reed's conference, basically said, we're getting out of the marriage business because we're not winning that one. Right. We're going back to abortion.
Yeah.
We're making progress.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, Dred Scott led to a civil war. I don't think that these marriage decisions are going to lead to that.
And
I hope not.
I hope not too. So
maybe if we declared it in Iraq.
San Francisco Archbishop or Cardinal or whatever he is,
Corleone,
did show up at the NOM March for Marriage, and Deacon McCubbin, who runs the Lambda Rising bookstore, went up to him, shook his hand, and said, "Hello, you're a disgrace to the church and an embarrassment to the Pope." Corleone did not respond, and wandered off.
And the federal same-sex marriage case in Louisiana was heard this morning as we tape. It was brought by the Forum for Equality Louisiana and is being heard before a Reagan appointee.
I watched the HBO Case Against 8 movie about the Perry case in California. You were not crazy about the movie. A lot of people are not crazy about it because it seems quite narrow in acting like that's the only marriage case that is.
Well, especially after 18,000 couples were already married in California a couple of years ago. So, like, we're not pushing for the first married couple or anything.
Look, we applaud the lawyers, we applaud the plaintiffs. We're glad it happened, but it's really been blown out of proportion. But here was my reaction to the movie. I thought it was a big bore.
Well, it was all I mean, we'd hate to have me say this, it was all one-sided. I mean, you don't hear from any of the opponents. You don't understand why Californians voted against same-sex marriage. Yeah. You never see Edie Windsor in it, of course, which was the case that we won a year ago.
Even when they get to the Supreme Court and the decisions.
Yes. Well,
I thought at least they'll show Edie coming out on the steps.
I remember when that day at the Supreme Court a year ago, and I'm seeing Chad Griffin, who now heads HRC, used to be with AFER, which brought the Perry case, coming out smiling. They didn't win. They were bounced back to the court of original jurisdiction. Yeah. But it was all for the movie.
Yeah.
And then they have all these HRC flags. Mm-hmm. Well, HRC issued a release this week touting Perry as a Supreme Court ruling. It was not a Supreme Court ruling. They did not rule in the case. They're really quite shameless, and they've got to stop it.
More on that when we get to ENDA. But the administration, the Obama administration came out with some announcements this week about marriage. What they say is they are doing what they can to implement the Windsor ruling that said the federal government must recognize legally married couples. So, I'm surprised. I remain disappointed. It's taken them a year to get to some of this stuff.
Well, the Labor Department said that same-sex. This is important. You should know this. The Labor Department said same-sex couples are eligible for emergency family leave, regardless of their state of residence.
That's a good thing.
The Department of Justice did a federal review, and they're saying you can have all your benefits. Now they're saying except Social Security and veterans benefits, which they say are based under law on where the individual lives, and that legislation is needed. Now,
they're asking for legislation. Now,
Kate Kendall says she wants the administration to join in on state suits, and GLAD says, this is GLAD in Boston, says Obama does have the authority to interpret the Social Security Act to cover same-sex couples in these states now.
I think that's certainly worthy of public discussion. The Social Security Administration did do a little playing with it. They say that if you apply for Social Security benefits while you are living in a state that allows legal marriage, and you are legally married, and then while you are in the process of applying for the benefits, you move to a state that doesn't allow legal marriage, they will not examine where you are moving to.
Is this the United States of America or not? That's what I want to know.
The Veterans Administration is doing a little playing with this by redefining this as all committed couples will have access to things like veteran cemeteries. So they're not limiting it to legal spouses. That's how they're getting around it. But here's the real kicker. So DOJ and the White House are saying, Congress, this is your problem. You have to fix it. Our groups are saying maybe not. But they had called gay groups into the White House to brief them on all this.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody who was in the meeting went to one of the gay bloggers and talked about, this is what they're doing with labor and veterans and Social Security. And the White House got so angry that their gay guy...
We're not having you in anymore.
You ignored our embargo. We will no longer brief you in advance of major decisions.
Do you have to punish us all for the sins of one?
God. Who do you think you are? The Reagan administration? The Nixon administration?
When I was a leader of a community-based organization, I always felt it was the obligation to report what happened
And, you know, this is not national security secrets. This
Should be on television.
This is, if you want it announced by you, then announce it.
Yes.
What are you holding back for? I think what they're holding back for is the Pride celebration on Monday at the White House, June 30th. Yes, I do. Well, and we'll see whether there's any news about this proposed executive order for non-discrimination by federal contractors.
The only worry we have about, the biggest worry we have about the executive order is whether it will contain an egregious religious exemption like the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. But we're even more concerned about it in this case because these are federal contractors. These people are getting tax money to perform public services, and there should be no exemptions for anybody who gets that.
Well, that's our objection to things like Catholic hospitals being allowed to discriminate. They get millions of dollars in public money. They get Medicare money. They get all sorts of reimbursements.
I mean, they act like they're helping you because they love Jesus, but it's because they're getting a lot of money. Our money.
Exactly. So I will break an embargo.
Okay.
Outside the entrance to the White House on Monday, when the Pride celebration is about to happen, there will be activists holding up a banner, such as I was holding the other night here in New York, and as we're now trotting around the city, we do have a picture of that, and there is the banner: "ENDA is not equal." And that is our Queer Nation campaign.
Made by the maker of the rainbow flag, Gilbert Baker.
Signed on the back. Well, his signature is there, too, where I'm holding it on the left.
We should all put our signatures on it.
Well, the point is that we are going around and doing educational campaigns. This is not a protest. It is an educational campaign to let people know that, in fact, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, first of all, covers only employment and only partially covers employment, and has this, as we say, gaping hole you could drive a truck through on religious discrimination.
You know, and I got some pushback from viewers about this, and they said, well, it's better than nothing, and
it's not.
And politics about compromise. But human rights laws can never be about compromise. They have to be equal rights laws. We have to get the same coverage as everybody else for our category. And if we start admitting, oh, yeah, well, yeah, you really shouldn't protect us in that, well, you've admitted that there's something wrong with us.
Look, I think there is, I of course, completely agree with you, but I can imagine a reasonable conversation that says,
sure, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
That says, all right, we have to do employment first, and then we can do public accommodations, and then we can do credit. We did go along with that for years. We did, and we still are.
As long as it was an equal.
This is not about incrementalism. It's not about this is the best we can get. This is not about settle for what we can get. This is about a bill that takes us backwards, a bill that is dangerous because it legalizes discrimination in a way that we've never let it be legal before.
And that is illegal in many states and localities.
And if this Hobby Lobby decision comes down,
which you may know about already, we don't
allowing corporations to declare themselves religious institutions for purposes of discrimination. In fact, let me quote Mel White, the founder of Soulforce. If Hobby Lobby wins its religious exemption, our battle for LGBTQ civil rights just might have to begin all over again.
Right. Well, look, the final battle is with religion. You hear us talking about these various denominations. You know, politicians are loath to stand up to religion. We love religion. We respect religion. Of course, we respect religious freedom.
It's in the Constitution.
And your right to believe these things. Mm-hmm. But the fight against bigotry against gay people and religion is the final battle.
Mary Buonato of Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the first person to win a marriage case in this country in Massachusetts 10 years ago, a heroine of this movement who deserves many movies made about her, says that the religious exemptions that the right wing is pursuing now all over the place, whether it's Hobby Lobby or Arizona or Mississippi or Kansas or ENDA, are an attempt to preserve homophobia as an acceptable prejudice in society and law.
Well, in Mississippi, that religious exemption, that religious liberty law, which allows you to discriminate against gays, goes into effect July 1st, and our folks down there are telling us they will be demonstrating that day against it.
Well, check that out and get involved if you're in that area. So, after this White House reception on Monday, there will also be a vigil at the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington at 8:30 p.m. by the Equality Pledge people who are pushing for a comprehensive civil rights bill. And their campaign is called Add 4 Words. We have the logo there.
Yes.
The idea is to, instead of writing a separate bill, just add sexual orientation and gender identity to the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
I mean, that was the original gay rights bill in the Congress that was introduced by Bella Abzug and Ed Koch, two New York members of Congress, who just added sexual orientation in those days to the Civil Rights Act of 1964-5. That was it. But there's been a lot of pushback on that. Again, we should explain why this happened. People now say, well, if we do that, it's going to open the Civil Rights Act up to all kinds of amendments, and you don't want to do that in the modern age, which is more reactionary, et cetera. We can talk about all that.
Absolutely. We can write a separate bill that is specific to sexual orientation and gender identity that is identical in its protections.
Just change one word in it, and then it's a different bill.
Well, whatever. The point is, here's the real point. We think, and we started this show with these huge victories, we are rolling in victories every week that we tell you about. The world has changed, certainly in this country. Not completely. There are many bad stories, and we get to those too. But the world is certainly very different than it was just a few years ago. And we are ready to push a comprehensive civil rights bill.
Well, they've certainly pushed back in Latta, South Carolina. We told you about that mayor there, Earl Hubbard, who fired the lesbian police chief, Crystal Moore, 2 months ago, partly because she was investigating some of his friends, I think. Anyway, so the town voted to restructure the powers, giving the city council more powers and the mayor less, so that they could get the police chief back. So between what we heard was that he was going to try to appoint a new police chief right now before Friday when this goes into effect.
Exactly.
Now, will they be able to change that on Friday?
Well, the city council will...
Or is she going to have tenure?
Well, the
new one.
The city council will assume powers of hiring and firing, so presumably they can get rid of whoever he hired and reinstate Crystal Moore, but, too bad for the new police chief who gets caught in the middle.
Yeah.
And there is good news around the country from small towns that are having their first pride parades, and we wanted to show you a couple of them. First, let's look at Kearney, Nebraska, and local coverage of the first pride parade there.
Hundreds made history today as they marched in Kearney's first ever gay pride parade. News 5's Kelly Baumgarten joins us live in the studio with the details. Kelly, what was their message?
Lauren, the group is not only trying to raise awareness for gay rights, but they were also celebrating the recent victories they've seen. Just this past Friday, the Obama administration granted several new benefits to same-sex couples, benefits that even apply in states that don't recognize gay marriage, like Nebraska. Hundreds of people waved rainbow flags, a symbol of gay pride, at Kearney's first ever pride parade.
We are loved by our communities, but some people are persecuted, and that's when we need to take a stand and walk down the street and celebrate ourselves and stand up to these bullies.
They all shared the same message. They're here, and they aren't going anywhere.
We don't stick out from everybody else. I mean, we all work normal jobs, and we have normal lives, and we're just here to celebrate who we are.
Keisha Wilson and Riley Wright are engaged and set to marry in Iowa because same-sex marriage is still illegal in Nebraska and 29 other states.
A lot of the bigger cities, Omaha, Lincoln, are really supportive, and it's just a matter of time before the support moves this way.
The group walked the streets preaching love and equal rights, but there are some Nebraskans who are still unwilling to accept the LGBTQ community.
He also made marriage, he made it for one man and one woman. And you know, you can't mess with what God has created and what God has set forth.
But despite the opposition, the group says Nebraska has come a long way.
I think it's really, you know, up and coming, but I think we still need to keep working to get it throughout the state and help us achieve what we're working for, which is equal rights for everybody.
Brian Whitecalf, organizer of today's parade, voiced his intention to run for Grand Island City Council. If elected, he says he hopes to make a difference in the lives of the LGBTQ community. Lauren?
Kelly Baumgarten live in
We
our
are taking over in the heartland.
I love that. I specifically like her emphasis on where it's still illegal in Nebraska and leaving out the "we're here, we're queer" part of that.
Yes, well,
right?
you know.
And then a little further south in Beaumont, Texas, they had a their first Pride parade
Hundreds.
there. Yeah. Also, you know, this is a grassroots movement, and people are coming out and doing it on their own, and that's what's so fantastic.
Can we show that?
Top story. Our area's first ever gay pride event got underway in downtown Beaumont. Hundreds took to the streets this morning, kicking off the event with a parade march down Broadway, some holding banners and signs calling for equal rights. The march ended with a block party on Arlene Street, where many people will be partying well into the night. And as 12 News HD reporter Adam Wright shows us, today's event has drawn all kinds of people from all over Southeast Texas, all hoping to share a message with the community.
Erica, it is hot out here today, but that hasn't kept hundreds of people from making their way out to Orleans Street here in downtown Beaumont. You can see there's still tons of people out here packing the streets, enjoying live music, food, and drinks. And of course, this all got started this morning with a march. For the first time in Beaumont's history, streets filled with members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community and their supporters, all coming together for a common cause.
If it's the first time in Beaumont, I wanted to be here.
There were men dressed in drag and some wearing barely any clothes at all. One carried an American flag with rainbow colors instead of red and white stripes. Many people brought their children to the event. Some kids even holding signs in support of gay rights.
I want people to know that they can love whoever they want to love.
We talk a lot about equality and about open-mindedness in my house and trying to show them that there's more than just our little small corner of the world. They wanted to come to Pride. I did not force them.
This is the first ever Beaumont Pride 2014.
When the walk was over, marchers packed Orleans Street, where local businesses had tents set up promoting their services. It was an eclectic crowd featuring a few interesting characters as gay and straight people alike joined in on the celebration.
We just want to show our support for the gay community, and hopefully that's something that Beaumont, you know, will start to embrace a little bit more.
It's very important that we all learn to live together, live in peace, live in harmony.
As soon as you can try to learn to love one another, I think you'll be all right. I think you'll be better for it.
This is something really great for Beaumont, first time ever. Really excited that so many people turned out for such a wonderful event.
It's been a really amazing and incredible journey. I can't wait to finally be able to sit down and visit with all these incredible people that I've met and all these new friends I've made.
And Beaumont Pride is not over yet. There's a lot of activities and performances scheduled all throughout the night. And another thing to note, Erica, is that since I've been out here, I haven't seen or heard of any kind of protesting taking place here today. In Beaumont, Adam Wright, 12 News HD.
Thank you, Adam. We asked you what you think of this event on our Facebook page, and we've gotten a lot of responses. Sharon writes, "No, I don't support that. It's disgusting and goes against God." Jennifer says, "Of course I support this. Everyone deserves equality, and I think it's fantastic."
Well,
Beaumont can do this for the LGBT
well,
community.
you know, it's the 45th one in New York, and I think there are 45th ones in a bunch of other cities as well. And I think I've been doing it since '74, and we get a little jaded. But if we were to report on the New York parade, it would be pretty much the same story.
I think the Beaumont and Kearney ones are far more charming.
Yes.
But we'll be out with our End is Not Equal banner at this Sunday's parade.
You can come meet us and say hello.
Starbucks put a big rainbow flag over their headquarters in Seattle. Oh. And Walmart took out a full-page ad in the Pride Guide. Walmart. Pay your workers.
I'm still not going there.
Yeah.
That would be better. Economic justice.
And Channel 4 here in New York is broadcasting the parade for the first time this year. They are, because we've been so mad at them for broadcasting the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Who's sponsoring it?
I don't know yet, but let me tell you. Rather than they get rid of the St. Patrick's Day parade, they added the Pride parade. But here's the promo. You know, watch the Pride parade. They don't say gay, they don't say LGBT, they just say pride,
we're the ones who call the damn thing Heritage of Pride. Now, of course, it used to be called Christopher Street Liberation Day, and it was the Christopher Street Liberation Day Committee that planned it for 10 years at least. Anyway.
In Louisville, Kentucky, Atherton High School has adopted a gender identity and expression non-discrimination policy because they have a trans student, and they responded positively to that.
And an out trans candidate was in Oklahoma. Paula Sophia finished second and will be in a runoff for a Oklahoma House seat there. Sophia is a 20-year veteran of the Oklahoma City Police Department. And
it's a gay seat. They have had gay representatives in that seat before who have are now trying to go on to higher office.
Congress.
So congratulations. Heather Mizur in Maryland came in third in the Democratic primary for governor, but got a lot of appreciation for her campaign.
How about that, Joe Biden? At the LGBT reception at his house, he said, "We're the majority, and they are the troglodytes." That was pretty bold for the vice president. He said LGBT rights were essential for any civilized country, and said he can respect cultural differences for religion, but not when those differences lead to persecution of innocent people. I wish I had it on tape.
Well,
I don't do a good Biden imitation, but those are rather bold statements.
Yes, well,
I think. Troglodytes, calling the other side troglodytes.
How about former Governor Brian Schweitzer of Montana, who said last week that, you know, he's fine with gay. He's all for that. But he just wants to say that Eric Cantor, by his gaydar, 60-70% probably gay.
I think
Brian, we wouldn't say anything like that.
In New York Pride, by the way, Boy Scouts for Equality are marching, and they're speaking out against the exclusion of gay adults, but they're not sure what the repercussions are going to be for them, because the Scouts have a thing against promoting or advancing any social or political agenda.
They could be in trouble. Secretary of State John Kerry did a big Pride event at the State Department, but at the same time, the State Department is rejecting visas for Africans who wanted to come to this country to march at the San Francisco Pride Parade with Melanie Nathan, who's a Grand Marshal.
Yes, they did. In Massachusetts, Governor Deval Patrick, his administration has removed barriers to health coverage for transgender people in private insurance and in public programs. But we haven't done it in New York.
Terrible.
Medicare has done it, but not Medicaid across the board.
And the New York State Senate, in its continuing walk of shame through history, failed to pass for the umpteenth year the Gender Identity and Expression Non-Discrimination Act, and failed to pass the proposed ban on conversion therapy for minors.
Well, that has to be laid at the feet of Governor Cuomo, who is going to probably march in the Pride Parade and still get a lot of credit from the glow in 2011 of engineering the marriage victory, which was substantial. But he's not coming through with the other things that we need.
He did. We told you last week that we were afraid people with HIV and AIDS were going to be cut out of the legalization of medical marijuana in this state. A compromise was reached that put people with HIV and AIDS back in the bill.
But you can't smoke it.
You can only use a vaporizer, and you can't just pick it up on the street somewhere.
Well,
there are 5 authorized growers and dealers who are supposed to be supplying it.
In Puerto Rico, the Senate there confirmed the out lesbian Maite Rodriguez 16-10 for the Commonwealth's Supreme Court, appointed by the governor.
And then the really sad news of violence, particularly against transgender women in Fort Myers, Florida. Should we start with that? Yes, we have a picture of Yazmin
Shancez.
Or Shancez, I'm not
Shancez, okay.
Described.
Well, that's her sister in a memorial march.
Yes.
She was a trans woman, 31, found dead and burned behind a garbage container. The Fort Myers police investigating it as a homicide, not as a hate crime. But there were 200 people who vigiled in Centennial Park to remember, and including family and friends.
And in Anaheim, California, we're mourning the death of
Zoraida
Reyes. Who was a big trans and immigrant rights activist. She was found dumped behind a Dairy Queen
in a bushy area.
We have a picture of her as an activist.
That was back on June 12th. It's being investigated as suspicious, but no immediate. They're saying there were no immediate signs of foul play. Even though the police say that the body was likely moved after she died. Reyes was a member of a bunch of groups down there.
One of the cases that got a lot of publicity a couple of years ago were the young lesbian couple in Corpus Christi, Texas, who were, I think, camping in a park and were approached by a guy and shot. One of them shot to death, the other severely wounded, one of them raped. They have now finally, 2 years later, arrested a suspect, a 27-year-old man, for this attack. We have a local news report on that.
New on the night beat, an arrest tonight in a shooting death that happened nearly 2 years ago near Corpus Christi. As the night team Stephanie Cerner reports, the suspect, who authorities have been searching for, was found in Helotes.
27-year-old David Malcolm Strickland was arrested today in connection with the shooting of 2 teenage girls at a park in Portland, Texas, back on June 23rd of 2012. Both girls were attacked and then shot in the head. 19-year-old Molly Olguin died in the shooting, and 18-year-old Mary Christine Chapa was seriously injured.
The information that we received was that he approached them at gunpoint. He ordered them down to a grassy area in the park, and that's where the assault and the shooting took place.
Strickland was hiding out at an apartment in the 12,000 block of Bandera Road in Helotes this afternoon when members of the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force took him into custody.
We did go in, and then, of course, that's where we see Mr. Strickland. We, of course, identified ourselves, explained that there were active warrants for his arrest, and then he was taken into custody without incident.
The murder had received national attention because the teens were a couple. However, police say so far there is no evidence to suggest that their relationship was a motive for the shooting.
And Strickland is currently being held custody at the Helotes Police Department, awaiting extradition to the San Patricio County Jail. He faces charges of capital murder and aggravated assault with a weapon.
I'm glad they finally arrested someone. I hope that is the perpetrator and they've got the right person. It's a terrible case.
Moving on to international news.
Yes.
Well, the beat goes on in the Dominican Republic. We ran last week the tape from U.S. Ambassador Wally Brewster, out gay, and his husband, Bob Sataki.
A very bold tape, I thought. Bold message.
Pride message.
Yeah.
The Catholic cardinal there, Rodriguez, we got a picture of both Wally Brewster and the cardinal. You tell me, yeah.
I think you can tell them apart.
Yeah. The cardinal there said, who am I to judge? No, he didn't. He called the ambassador a Maricon previously, a faggot, basically. Now he says Brewster should take his pride elsewhere. When Brewster was appointed, Rodriguez organized a black armband protest, because they called it an insult to good Dominican customs, like homophobia.
The White House made some statements about and some decisions about Uganda this week. The State Department will bar entry to the United States of Ugandan. Thank you.
Whatever.
Abusers of human rights. They made it a general statement, but it specifically includes LGBT human rights.
And they cut some aid and they canceled some military exercises, but it's the same week that a Ugandan court ruled that the government can basically stop LGBT groups. And one of the activists down there said, this is like the second or third nail in our coffin.
Well, we had hoped, because we have been lulled into a sense of complacency by court decisions in the United States, we had hoped that when activists went to court in Uganda to challenge the anti-gay law, that maybe that would be a way out, and would be a way out for the president, too, because then he could say, well, they did it and I didn't. But, in fact, the court has ruled against us, has upheld the law.
That's right.
And...
well, USA doesn't seem to make any difference. I mean, Kerry just gave Egypt jillions of dollars in military aid, and can't even get those 3 journalists from Al Jazeera out of the Hooskow.
And this is spreading. Gambia now has plans to outlaw homosexuality, referring to gay people as vermin.
Banning organizing and individuals. Well, that sounds rather ominous. And Kyrgyzstan is looking to pass a gay propaganda ban a la Russia.
Yes.
Everybody's getting into the act. An East-West divide.
Yes, it is. And there's controversy about us at the World Cup because it turns out that it is traditional for the Mexican fans to shout puto at opposing teams.
Which kind of means faggot.
Kind of does, kind of means whore. Well,
yes,
you know,
yes, it has other roots.
Yes.
Well, you know, even the word gay has its roots in gay girls, who were hookers, essentially.
Well, putain in French is hooker or prostitute. So there's some confusion about the word, but they certainly are out to humiliate opponents.
FIFA said they'd investigate this, and they did, and then they dismissed the charges because it's not considered insulting in this specific context.
And ESPN is very happy to air the fans shouting these chants.
In Alberta, Canada, officials ruled that gender reassignment surgery for a transgender person is not necessary to change on your certificates.
Well, this is the case of a 12-year-old
Ren Kaufman,
transgender boy, and to require him to have surgery at this point seems a little egregious. So I think that's a very enlightened decision in Alberta, which is one of the more conservative provinces of Canada. And from our favorite little, but opera correspondent, Donald, thank you for sending this story. We hear about an opera singer, Tamar Iveri, who is kicking up quite a storm. She called gay people fecal masses, supported thugs in the country of Georgia.
I was quite proud of the fact how Georgian society spat at the parade. Often in certain cases it is necessary to break jaws in order to be appreciated as a nation. And a
nation in the future.
So she gets a lot of cancellations of her appearances in Australia, Belgium, all these places. And she says, I didn't write that, my boyfriend did.
Her husband.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Yes, there was some apology,
I'm sorry.
some confusion.
I apologize to her boyfriend.
Did we put up the picture of her? Okay.
Yeah, we did. In Spain, the new monarchs, King Philippe and Queen Letizia, that's her name, met with heads of LGBT groups, and that's a first. And okay.
Okay. In AIDS news and health news, we've talked a lot here about the criminalization of people with HIV. And it turns out that even if the system doesn't get you, individuals will. And this is a terrible case from Texas where a guy, Justin Welch, strangled and killed the woman who was giving him oral sex.
We have a picture of them. Her name is
Henson.
30, brutally murdered.
Because he found out she was HIV positive.
Her body was found 2 months ago. He had been hiding in the San Antonio area and has been apprehended.
And aside from the horror of this whole situation, the tragedy, of course, is him thinking that her giving him oral sex posed a risk to him of HIV transmission, which, if it exists at all, would be so infinitesimal as to be virtually impossible.
Right.
And the continuing ignorance about this is resulting in terrible stories.
So they're trying to raise our consciousness, and they're having National HIV Testing Day set for June 27th. Whether it's already happened or it's going to happen for you, any day is a good day to get an HIV test if you're at risk. The sooner you know, the better your chances are for treatment and long-term survival. So the theme is take the test, take control.
And take the time to get educated about the details of the virus and the epidemic so you're less at risk or can take care of yourself and your partners if you are infected.
Now, the International AIDS Conference this year is in Melbourne, and Eaglehurk is saying that due to drastic cuts in funding, lots of LGBT folks will not be able to attend, and they're asking them to, I guess you can go to the Eaglehurk website, I mean, they're asking people to sort of send in their pictures and their message because they can't go.
Well, you know, the scientists want to make it a scientific conference. It's about exchanging information, supposedly every couple of years about advances, although with the internet, do you really need to get together? And the activists want to go because they want to put pressure on scientists to do certain kinds of action and to become advocates for people with AIDS.
Well, I mean, transgender activists in New York busted up a meeting where the health commissioner of New York State was speaking and held up a big banner about covering the things we were talking about before that they're covering in Massachusetts in terms of hormone treatments and you know, gender reassignment surgery and all those kinds of things under Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. All right, on to...
I saw that on Amy Goodman's show.
A viewer alerted us to the upcoming series on PBS, Vicious, which starts this Sunday on some PBS stations. Check your local listings.
Two of the greatest actors in the history of the English-speaking world, Ian McKellen and Derek Jacobi, really just taking a paycheck for this. Let me tell you, I've seen a little bit of it online. I mean, it's sort of fluff and fun, but you know, they're an aging gay couple who are kind of catty and it's very stereotypical, but they're having, I guess they're having fun and they're making money.
Well, we're in favor of that for those who need
it. You check it out. I mean,
now, is Gary Oldman making money?
So I used to like Gary Oldman. I don't like him anymore.
He's quite conservative, isn't he?
I guess so. He gives a Playboy interview, and he complains that Mel Gibson and Alec Baldwin got bum raps for their anti-Semitism and their homophobia, respectively. He said, Mel got drunk and said a few things, but we've all said things. Well, here's the kind of things that Mel says. Jews are he said this publicly to the cop. Yeah. Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. Oh, President Obama was just saying that last week. He was getting very frustrated about the Iraq situation. So he said, no, he didn't. I don't know anybody who talks like that.
Well,
I don't.
The thing about Mel Gibson is he does it repeatedly, or he used to. He hasn't. We haven't heard it lately because he's kept his mouth shut, but he used to say these kinds of things over and over.
So while we celebrate LGBT pride, Gary Oldman celebrates Be Kind to Bigots Day.
By the way, if you would like to join us in marching with the ENDA is Not Equal banner this Sunday in New York in the Pride Parade, you can meet up with us on Sunday at 12:30 p.m. at the corner of 6th Avenue and West 38th Street, where we will be assembling and gathering ourselves together to join the Pride Parade and spread our message. We will also have a lot of flyers to pass out to people in the parade and spectators along the
Will there be any refreshments? Actually, you get water from the Presbyterian Church, the Collegiate Church. You know, the Catholics would be wise to do this as well, to show that they love us also, but they don't.
No, instead they've managed to get the parade to start below St. Patrick's Cathedral.
That was a little Bloomberg maneuver.
Yeah, so we also this week mourn the death of the guy Caleb, who was on Survivor as the boyfriend of Colton Cumbie. Colton was on the previous year, and he was quite a villain, and he was a very sort of nasty, stereotypical gay guy who's playing this character, sort of.
He should be on Vicious.
He should. That could have been his Chiron on Survivor. He was not a popular guy, and he got kicked off fairly early on Survivor. And then they did a subsequent series of shows where they brought back some of the old players and put them together with some of their relatives and friends. And they brought Colton back with his boyfriend, this guy, Caleb. And Caleb turned out to be the nicest guy in the world, and everybody loved Caleb. He was a real sweetheart. Well, go figure. Everybody wondered what he was doing with Colton. But he sort of humanized Colton, and it was really nice to see them as a couple on the show, and that became a very popular storyline. Caleb was a train engineer in Birmingham, Alabama, and the news this week is that he was killed in a terrible accident in a rail yard. He was examining a coupling between a couple of cars, and suddenly they crashed together and he was caught in between. And it's a very sad story, and he will be sorely missed.
Right.
He was a nice guy.
I don't usually talk about these things because they have all these pride celebrations that the politicians put on, but I went to the one that the city council did this year in New York, where they honored a lot of people, and it was headed by Melissa Mark Viverito, who is the new Speaker of the Council, herself not a lesbian, but she says, I've got, 2 gay brothers. And of course, there are 6.
I like that they have to establish their credentials.
There are 6 out city council members, 3 of them people of color. And the beautiful thing about the ceremony was that the kinds of things people talked about were all the other issues that we're connected to. Economic justice, immigrant rights, feminism, all those things. And that was the real theme of the evening, and that was very heartening.
And people gave very stirring speeches. Who was honored?
Oh, my. I mean, Alan Roscoff, brought back from the wilderness. He was a very big opponent of the former speaker, Chris Quinn. Robert Pinter was honored. Robert Pinter, of course, we talked about him settling his case. He was falsely arrested for prostitution. That he also had a rally at the Stonewall. Now, I'll tell you, I show up for this thing because he asked me to speak, and there are about 10 people standing there, and I'm thinking, what the hell are we doing? And it ended up being about 30 or 40 people, and we were all kind of talking to each other, but it was one of the best pride things I've ever been to. Even Jim Farrat spoke and said, you know who should be arrested? The people who perpetrated this crime against Robert Pinter, the police commissioner, Mayor Bloomberg, the cop himself. Where is the prosecution for people like this who cost the city $450,000 in damages?
But that is such an old story in New York. Those people never get prosecuted, caught, punished, anything.
The biggest hand of the night, I think, was for David Rothenberg, who's 81. He says, I'm getting an award for hanging around, but he's the founder of the Fortune Society.
He's one of the best guests we've ever had on this show because he was so eloquent and amusing.
Jason Collins was honored there.
The basketball player.
He's from the Brooklyn Nets, and he said, look, I just want to make it easier for the people who come after me, which is kind of why we all do this and why you should do this as well.
Well, take Kearney, Nebraska and Beaumont, Texas as your role models this week because they did a great job, and so did everybody in the marriage cases. Happy Pride. We will see you next week.
They also